today. I'm sharing the new moon in Libra, and I want you to see that this is AstroSeek. Let me get my pointer so that you will see what's going on. So this is the AstroSeek, and if you want to go to horoscopes.astro-seek.com, then you'll be able to bring up your own chart. You do need your own birth time if you're going to do this, because if you're guessing the time, because the rising sign changes every couple of hours, you could be way out. So you don't want to guess your birth time when you're doing your chart. I'm pointing you to this because, I'm very grateful that I've got this, that we have these facilities. I'm going to show you solar fire as well. And I'm also going to show you, astro.com, which is another site, which I'll be able to show you my own chart and take you through how I would look at my chart with the new moon or a full moon, but we're doing the new moon in this case so that when you look at your chart, you begin to educate yourself and understand what you're looking for, because we're really looking at aspects as well. We're not just looking for the rising sign, the houses. We want to know, the whole lot, and we want to know what the aspects mean for us. So I'll show you what that's doing for me. So new moon is a time for when it's a time when we're going to begin to rejuvenate, and then we're going to manifest up until the full moon. And then a full moon is where we have a culmination of all the work we've done. A new moon in astrology works through the whole month, and a full moon works through the following 2 weeks, because then it begins to wane again. It goes waxing, waning. So the full moon is where we culminate, and then we culmination and reflection, and then we sort of put things behind us or releasing certain things, and then we go back into the cycle again. And each time this happens, it happens in a different house, and it happens and it has different aspects and all sorts of things going on. So a new moon in Libra is where we have a strong need for balance and harmony at the moment. And I'm feeling that, like I need to be balanced. So in order to be balanced, sometimes that means that we draw a line in the sand and we say, hey, this is not what I want anymore. I want something different, because this isn't balanced enough for me, or it's not what I, am agreeing to anymore. I want to do something else. And we want harmony. And in order to create harmony, sometimes we have to let certain things be on their way, and then we bring in new things that will bring us new harmony. So I'm doing a bit of both, and you may be doing that yourself. I know that for me, this is in my 10th house, which I'll show you. So you want to know what house it's happening in for you, and then those aspects. It's also where we want things nice. Libra, Venus, the ruler is Venus, rules Libra. It also rules Taurus. And it's also where we don't want, our peace disturbed, but, collectively, there's a lot kicking off right now. So whilst the moon is doing one thing, we've got other planets. So if you see here, I'll make sure I'm sharing the right thing before I go forward. Let's see, new share, making sure I'm sharing it because Mercury is retrograde. So whilst we also don't want to be afraid of sharing our feelings, like the good feelings and not so good feelings. Like, it's okay to tell people what we think. Libra can be sometimes, I've got 3 planets in the 7th house. I've got my sun and moon in the 7th house, which is not Libra, but it's Gemini for me, but it has that Libra thing going on. And I have to bounce things off of people. And it's okay to change our mind about things. Definitely, if we've agreed to one thing in the past, we can change that agreement. We don't have to stick to it. There is a book called The 4 Agreements that I listened to on Audible a few weeks ago. So you can also read that. I read it years and years ago when it first came out, but I did a recap on it, and it's really useful to understand about the 4 agreements, in the idea of what the agreements are, and then to decide how we're going to manage our lives. If you see that we've got the Saturn is square to Uranus, that North Node is still, if you look here, the North Node is 13 degrees, yeah? And the Uranus is currently at 18 degrees. So that North Node is here at 13, and it's halfway through now. And it takes a year and a half to go through a sign. The North Node is in Taurus, the South Node is in the sign of Scorpio. So the more we dig on a chart, the more we can understand what's going on. Now, the Saturn square Uranus, Saturn restriction, Uranus is breaking free of limitation, but it's also long-term memory and also trauma. So long-term memory can be things that we really don't recall, but we might get triggered and then we recall something, as an example, which is trauma-based. And for each of us, we're each on a different understanding of what trauma is for us. The more we understand and know who we are, the more we can see how past events play out in our lives. If we look at the North Node in Taurus, for all of us, this is the collective chart. Our destiny is where we really basically right now are seeking and for stability, and it's very unstable with that Uranian energy there. Anything, you know, it's like shocking events and not for better and worse. Sometimes a shock is a good thing, you know. It can be, you know, it could be shocking to win the lottery, for instance. I don't play it, but it could be shocking to win, if you get me. So, but then it can also shocking things. We've got the instability at the moment around food and fuel. A lot of people have been whacked with really their bills almost going up by 50%. And we know that not everybody's going to be able to accumulate resources in order to do that. So the government sort of stepped in. I'm very wary of that myself, because the more we're looked after, then the more it's like a parental role. Like, you know, if you're a kid and you want something from your parent and they're not, you know, willing to give it to you, then you can sometimes fawn. And that's a trauma response where we're extra nice to people in order to have our needs met. And we don't really want to be in that position, I think, with authority. We want to be in a position with authority that we're on an equal footing, and the authority is not an abusive authority, as an example. We want authority that's leadership, that cares and actually doesn't have any ulterior motives. It's worth thinking about that. And also, we don't know what goes on in other people's minds when we look throughout the world at the moment with certain things going on. I just read a news cap on something that was unpleasant in a Middle Eastern country where somebody, a female, had been arrested, and there's some upsetting news because she lost her life. And it's, you know, these things can be, when authority is abused, as an example, it can be very unfortunate for people. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I'm only reading the news, and we have to understand the news is what comes through to us. We don't know what level of truth and the exact story. So that's the other thing with the Mercury retrograde at the moment. We don't, you know, we're taking a step back in what's going on. And when we look back to all of the miscommunication or misinformation, a lot of misinformation is now becoming, well, it wasn't misinformation, but people thought it was misinformation at the time. I'm sure if you follow what's going on in the world, you can see that for yourself. So the North Node is where we want to anchor ourselves, and it's about our values and our worth, and reminding others of their value and their worth as well. This is our job right now for the next year and a half. So it was a year and a half, so that's 12, that's 18 months. So 18 divided between 2. So we got another 9 months of this Uranian, not the Uranian energy, the North Node is probably about 8.5 months in Taurus, and then it will move into the sign of Aries. That will be, I don't know what that's going to be like, but we're not there yet, so we won't worry about that for the time being. So the nodes take 18 years to move around the chart, a year and a half actually, a year and a half per sign. So times 12, that's 18 times 12 times 1.5. That's 18 years, okay? So, and they move around the chart that way. And the South Node is in Scorpio. So with the South Node in Scorpio, we want to look at the deeper meaning behind everything, but at the same time, we want to be able to help others feel safe and secure as well. And we can do that, you know, as we heal our own traumas and whatever, and we're developing and maturing, then we can do that. The new moon, you can see here, is going to be at 22:54 p.m. in the UK. And if you are in New York, that's going to be 5:54, if I get that right. You might need to double check that. And then if you're in California, then you're 8 hours behind. So that would be 3, 4, 5. So that's going to be about 3:54 p.m. Let's look at the time here. So we can see that's got 21:54, but that is that BS? Let's see. The time may not be set there properly, but just know that we'll see it on Solar Fire more clearly. Then what we have is, I'm going to run through a few more things here. We've got Pluto in a beautiful trine to all of these planets here, which is Venus. We've got Mercury retrograde. They're both in Virgo. The moon and the sun are 2 degrees of Libra. And we've got Pluto in its last leg of Capricorn. We all very much know in astrology what's going on there. It's like patriarchal rule, the masks that we wear, not the ones we had to wear, but the masks that we wear in the world that we put on, and we want people to see as a particular way. So we've got, and in Capricorn, we know that the ruler is Saturn. So we know that there's restriction up there anyway. It's very like solid, you know, sort of teacher-like father figure, in the sense of, if we look at the, you know, if we said the fatherland or whatever, we could say the motherland, but you know, it's basically, we're looking at the way that with astrology information was put into the planets over hundreds of, probably thousands of years. If we go back 5,000 years, you know, for instance, I'm sure astrology was being used in ways that people were giving names to the stars and the galaxies, or whatever they could see. Maybe they couldn't see galaxies, but the planets 500 years ago, Galileo, and we go back to Nostradamus as well. And a lot of people, I saw in a British online today, in a British newspaper, saying that Nostradamus made predictions. They actually didn't mention in the article that he was an astrologer. So if you did not know that, Nostradamus was an astrologer and he made some predictions. So a lot of people know who his name is anyway, but the astrologer bit is important to know, that he wasn't just making predictions and writing books, he was up to other stuff. We've got, it's very interesting as well, because that in the coming years, when we look at Pluto's moving out of, these are big moves, yeah, this is Pluto moving out of Capricorn, then we're going to have Neptune will be moving into Aries, you know, maybe I think that's about 5 years away, 4 or 5 years away. Let's see what else is going on. Uranus is at 18 degrees. That Uranus takes 84 years around the chart, and Chiron, which is the wounded healer or the wound, takes 50 years around the chart, roughly 49 to 51 years. Neptune takes 164, if I'm correct, remembering correctly. Pluto takes 245, roughly, and Saturn is about 29 and a half. The sun, we know, takes a year around the chart. The moon is 28 days. Venus is 224 days, and Mercury is 88 days, and Mars is 2 years. And I believe that Mars goes retrograde. It's going retrograde on the 30th of October. Again, we'll check on Solar Fire, and that will go retrograde for up until around Christmas time. That word, the end of the year, sounds better to me. And then it will go direct, but it's going to be, Mars is going to be in Gemini all the way through to, I think, the first week in March, but again, we'll check. So let's go over to, you can see the trines, by the way. Saturn is trine. This is an interesting one too. Saturn is trying to Mars, and then we've got this beautiful Pluto, which uncovers things, is trying to all of this stuff. So this is some good stuff. The nodes are still square to Saturn, see there? And Uranus is still square to Saturn as well. And the last time that was 2021, that first square kicked in December 2021. And we know what happened at the beginning of the year there. There was chaos for you guys in the USA. We know what that was about. I think it was Capitol Hill. I'm not familiar with politics, but I do know, what goes on through the stuff that comes through the mobile phone, and that we get updates and whatever. Because if we follow certain platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms, we tend to get news anyway that comes through. So we can see that all of this is in opposition to Jupiter, and Jupiter is about expansion. Again, we have to take into account that all of these planets are retrograde. Look here, Mercury is retrograde, Jupiter is retrograde, Saturn is retrograde, Uranus is retrograde, and Neptune is retrograde, and Pluto is retrograde. So, and Lilith, we won't go there, but stations and then moves again. So, and Chiron is retrograde, and that is a lot of retrogrades to be dealing with. But when all these planets start going forward, where we've all gone internal, and we're having this worldly internal Jasmani going on or not. Some of us may be at peace and feeling okay about life, but for others, it's going to be really deep work that's been going on. And then when all the planets start moving direct, it will become outward again. The changes that we've made internally will then be projected onto the outside world. So let me show you here. I'm going to show you my astrology chart, and then we're doing solar fire. So, okay, so this is my chart. You can see here that I've got all of this 10th house stuff going on. There's my MC, this is my 10th house. And you can see that I've got Venus up there on my MC. I've got Mercury retrograde. I've got, as we all have at the moment, and we've got this moon that's up here, and it's in my 10th house. So this for me is to do with my public life. It's to do with my work. In fact, it's working out quite interesting because I'm starting next weekend I'm doing a year in clinical hypnosis, a diploma in clinical hypnosis, which will be looking at the unconscious, the subconscious, and it's very important that we are able to change things about ourselves so that we stop repeating patterns. It did say on the syllabus, actually, which I'm quite interested. The exam for me will be on the 5th of August, 2023. So I've got a whole year, and that's starting next weekend for me. So it's a new path in a way. It's like with the new moon, it's where we rejuvenate and then we manifest again, and then we basically, it's time where I'm going to be doing stuff that's going to be working towards my future. And there's something else I've got going on as well with regard to understanding marketing and stuff like that, which is really important when you are doing this sort of work online, so that people book you and that people know you exist and what you're up to. So let me tell you briefly, I'm just going to show you a few of those aspects for me so you can sort of guess for yourself what's going on. The moon for me is here, and if we go here, it's in opposition to my Saturn, just about. So it's 5 degrees off separating, so it's not like that scary for me, because Saturn always does sound scary, doesn't it? And the moon is our emotion, so the restriction, it can feel a bit, I'll tell you what that means as well in a moment. Then I've got the moon is square to Jupiter, so this moon for me is square to my Jupiter here, which is an exact square. So this is our beliefs and it's our education. Jupiter is some expansion, it's our spiritual beliefs, it's also overseas travel. Sagittarius, it's just tipping into the 8th house for me, but it's actually in the 7th there. Although because I do have if you look here, it's actually in my 7th house. And I've got the moon trine to the sun, which is quite beautiful. So the moon is trining my sun here because I'm 0 degrees. So that's a trine, which is quite lovely. Then it's also the sun. So the sun is doing the same. It's opposition Saturn and square Jupiter and trine to the sun. So sun is trining my sun. This is quite a nice chart for me, I have to say. The moon is quintile. A quintile is a angle that is quite interesting, and it can take time to understand astrology because the aspects are different degrees. So the moon, when I look at it, is quintile. So if we go here, and the moon is quintile to my power of fortune, which is not on, I can't see it on this chart. It's actually 14 degrees of Sagittarius for me. So it's 72, it would be 72 degrees exactly. And I'll tell you what that means, but I just have to pull up a bit of paper from my end so I don't misrepresent myself or give out any misinformation. Haha. It's quite funny. Right, so, and I will tell you at the moment, I've had a touch of what I believe is probably COVID from the symptoms I've got. But I was coughing a lot, dry cough. It's really annoying me, but it's eased off this afternoon. I've been whacking up and doing lots of zinc and vitamin C and doing smoothies, which I do anyway, but I just upgraded a little bit to make sure that I got a little bit more of the good stuff in me so that I felt better. So let's see, I haven't got the quintile here, have I? Trine. I want to find it because it's quite, yeah, it's quite lovely, 72 degrees. So it says the strongest of the 5 family aspects are not listed here. So I'm reading from a document. It says a combination that stresses creative approaches to overcoming problems. So it's going to give me some stress to, and it will allow me to find creative approaches to overcoming problems and the use of the intellect and imagination to transcend old limitations. And it's quirky in nature, and it's not really good or bad, you know. It's just something that any problems I've got will be worked out through looking at things in a creative way. Like, we can have problems and then we can get creative about it and we can make great changes. I'm sure we've all experienced that. In fact, dream time can do that as well. So I do feel, because I have this cold, I'd call it a cold, but the symptoms are COVID apparently. So I would say that I'm okay and I look quite healthy in my view, but I did feel a bit rough for a few days. So the good news about that for me is, that pleased me, is that as we're going into winter, because the numbers have been going up in the UK, and I've not been injected either, because I didn't want to be, because I was overzealous, I don't know if that's the right word, and also some anxiety around, you know, having something that I didn't know what the result of it would be, meaning having anything in my body that I don't really understand. So it's a risk we take when these things happen. And I did have some friends of mine in the USA that were, you know, very much forced into it, and some people here that worked in the NHS who were not very happy that they were put in that position at all, on hindsight, because a lot of people that had it, you know, basically a lot of people have had COVID even though they were given something to stop it happening to them. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So let's see. And then also the other thing that was disturbing me a bit was this thing that's going around about 8 mice on something. So maybe you can Google that. Say no more. 8 mice. Somebody's Dr. John Campbell on YouTube. Dr. John Campbell on YouTube. Google that later. Don't do it now whilst I'm talking to you. Wait a bit later and write it down and remember that. Now we're going to go, so you can see that this is what's going on. Now we're going to look at, I'm going to give you an example of what that transit moon is trining my sun. So it gives me a sense that there is harmony between my soul and my body. So I do feel some harmony. And also I'm more open and honest with others at this time, and that's the meaning of that. And if it says if this transit occurs at night, you will sleep well, haha. So it will be 11 o'clock at night here when it hits. So I'll still be awake though, but I'm sure I'll sleep well tonight anyway, because I basically had this little cold going on and I've been sleeping a bit deeper. Then they've got the transit sun trine the sun, and it says I'll be full of energy and my self-expression will improve and my confidence will increase. So that when we begin to look at aspects, so that sun trine my sun, look, the sun is there at 2 degrees, and down here is my natal sun. That's what I mean when I'm saying sun trine sun. And we can see that will last a couple of days. So even though I've had this bug going on for me, I do feel like I've got, I do feel good so it's interesting how this plays out, that depending on what the chart's saying and then how life is, how we're living it. This is the thing with astrology. We worry about what's going to happen with astrology, but what we forget to remember is that we are living the chart anyway. So we have free will to a degree, that we can do things one way or another way, and we can look after ourselves. But then there are some things that go on in society where people have no choices. And I'll go into that a little bit when we look at the other chart on solar fire. So the transit moon opposition Saturn, a lot of people would be interested in that one. So look here, it's separating by 5 degrees. And it does say this is where we, it's not one thing in a chart. It says I could be in a bad mood, could feel a bit depressed, and you may find it difficult to express yourself. You have problems with authorities and distrust of others. So yeah, there's a bit of distrust going on in me and what's going on in the world right now. But also it says I could feel less energetic. So I have had this cold thing going on, and the moon was approaching, and then it will be moving off. So, but then the moon is doing that every 28 days, the moon would touch in opposition to my Saturn every 28 days, because that's the cycle of the moon. But the sun would be doing that once a year. Okay, so that's separating there. So the sun opposition to Saturn would give a different meaning. So the sun is my vitality, it's my life. So yeah, I can see maybe why I've been a little bit don't like the word unwell. It's just I've been a bit challenged, and that's just the way it is, because it's going around, and we just have to know that and then look after ourselves. So the transit sun opposition Saturn, what does it mean? It means you're facing obstacles and you can feel a bit insecure, and you can underestimate yourself actually. So, and it says, avoid negative thinking and try to approach matters less seriously. There was a wonderful hypnosis guy, or called Emile Coué, C-O-U-E, Emile, E-M-I-L-E, Coué. And he came up with a saying, which was, for what it's worth, is every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And he suggested that you get a bit of it could be ribbon or a thin piece of rope, and you tie 20 knots in the rope. And then in the morning, once a day, twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, you sit there with the rope like beads, where you count them, and you hold and you move your mouth when you say it. You hold on to the little knot, and you say, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And then you say it again, and you go, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And you say it 20 times. So if you think about this right now, that if my body's feeling a bit pushed and a bit tough right now, and I say that, then I am changing something in my body. Clearly, we don't know how powerful we are really, because I think a lot of us, we do these things. It's not about positive thinking. It's about releasing the mind for a split second from the garbage that is put into us, and then releasing that in a way that's allowing some freedom and space to occur in us, that then allows for new stuff to come in, instead of getting stuck in a loop on something that's fruitless, or that's not really helpful. So that, you could try that maybe. I was thinking I might get a bit of ribbon and tie 20 knots in it, a nice piece of ribbon, and just be able to carry that around with me. Or if I found something with 20 beads on it, or I could even make my own, actually. That's the point. I could make a, beaded thing with 20 beads on it and knots in between, however we want to do it. But we could think that things like that don't work, that what I just said, like every day in every way I'm getting better and better. But the reality is that how would we know unless we try it? So if we tried it like pretty consistently, regardless of what we're feeling, and it's not about if we're not feeling great and we're having an off day, that we punish ourselves, because a lot of that punishing can come from society that believes that, that it's wrong to be upset or negative. And a lot of us have unhealed traumas or flashbacks that come up, and we need to, verbal nurturance from each other, rather than to be dismissed that there's something wrong with us because we're having a bad day. As an example, people go through losses and grief, and we all need a modicum of love in order to flourish. Like beautiful flowers, they need the rain. The plants need the rain to grow, and they need sunshine. They need a mixture of things. And rain is neither good nor bad, neither is the sun, so to speak, but it depends on how we deal with things and how we look after ourselves. I think that makes sense. So now let's go over to the emanated page. I'm going to double check I've got that here, and my pointer. And I do feel a bit slower today because of what I told you, but it's not a big deal if you get me. So the sun conjunct the moon, let's make sure it's correct. So the sun is conjunct the moon, and then we're going to look at the retrograde planets. We're going to go, you see here, if we start, Jupiter is at 3 degrees, it's going to touch back into Pisces. And that's a big change, going from Aries back into Pisces, in truth. Because in Aries, it means we're freedom loving, spontaneous, and we're seekers of the truth. And we have the potential to be philosophical or leaders, or even religious leaders, but we don't have to go there with the religious bit. But, we could be handing out, information or helping others. So, but we could be forceful about it too, which is not great if people are forcing their belief systems onto us or anybody else. But there are things that help people. Now, if we take that back, and I'm going to go days ahead. So I'm moving it quickly because I want to see. So when it goes back into, let's see that date there. That's the 30th of October. This is quite interesting. So let's go forward. I want to show you something. So this is what I want to show you. This is the 27th of October. So at that point, we've got Jupiter at 0 degrees. That's going to go retrograde back into Pisces for a while. And then we've got Mars that's also going to go then retrograde. Okay, so watch this. One day, two. So on the 28th of October, Jupiter goes back into Pisces, and then, because it's already been there, because it's on retrograde, and then the day after, we've got the station of Mars in Gemini, that's then going to go all the way back, and then it will be there until March. It will then go direct again. The transit of Mars generally takes 2 years around the chart, but every 2 years it goes retrograde. And when it goes retrograde, then we basically can struggle a bit. So on a retrograde, that's a station. If we go take it to retrograde, so Mars retrograde there. Mars in Gemini is basically where we like to initiate ideas and where we're spreading information. It's like our libido. So Gemini is where we're communicating, and it's the ruler is Mercury. And with Mars, the libido is not so. Jung talked about this, and he took away the aspect of understanding, not just in part it's our libido, but or libido is not just to do with sex, it's to do with libido is our energy to go get something, you know, go do something, but it's also our impulsiveness. See, we can see that if we're spreading information and then we're having this impulsiveness and then we're having to go back on ourselves as well as this is moving through. And with Mars, it's we could feel our ideas quite strong because Mars is also ruled by, you know, it's to do with Aries as well. So it's where we could make an impact on our surroundings. This is the third house there. So interesting stuff. I'm just going to cough. Excuse me. That is part of my symptom there that I'm having, which is wearing off. That's good because I haven't coughed all afternoon. So do it, excuse me for that. So then we've got other stuff going on here that's really interesting. And we've got Chiron is in the first house. It's in Aries, not the first house. And then we've got this node, this Saturn, which is going to be retrograde up here. It's going to go direct, actually. So let's look at the day it goes direct. That's the thing I forgot. That's going to be interesting. So we're going back. There you go. It stations, and that's the 23rd of October. So we can see there's a lot of movement going on here. That's going to go direct again. There you go. So on the 24th of October, so you can see all of this movement going on. It's like you know, it's very difficult to know where we're going right now with what's going on in the world as well. I have been listening to various astrologers that I do follow. There's some beautiful people out there who are doing astrology. In one, I've listened to the Leo King. Love his stuff. I also listened to Lada, Astro Lada. And I also love Simon Forster, who worked with me on my own chart. And I did a program with him called the Metamorphosis Program, which really helped me a few years ago. And I always listen to his updates as well as they come through. So you can get varying different views on what people understand about astrology and how they're reading charts. It's a great way to educate yourself.